The Galactic Council had been very clear in their warnings. Dr. Alara Ven sat in the sterile briefing room aboard the orbital station, listening to the Xarathi ambassador's mandibles click with what she'd learned to recognize as condescension. "Humans may think themselves clever," the insectoid diplomat said, compound eyes glittering in the harsh light. "But the Vorath are apex predators. Their young are born with killing instincts. Even the cubs have claimed the lives of experienced handlers." Alara smiled politely, her hands folded on the table. "I understand the risks." "Understanding and surviving are different concepts," interjected Commander Thelos, a towering Karathi whose blue-scaled skin seemed to shimmer with disapproval. "3 of our finest xenozoologists refuse this assignment. The Vorath homeworld is a death trap. The adults are manageable only because they possess reason. The cubs? They are monsters in miniature." "Then it's fortunate I'm not trying to tame them," Ilara replied softly. "I'm trying to understand them." The council had reluctantly approved her research expedition, though she suspected it was partly to prove humanity's foolishness. The Vorath were a recently contacted species, their integration into galactic society tenuous at best. They were massive 6-limbed creatures with obsidian scales and rows of crystalline teeth that could shear through starship hull plating, beautiful in their way, terrifying in every other. The planet Vorathis Prime greeted her with crimson skies and forests of razor grass that sang in the wind. Ilara's research station was little more than a reinforced habitat dome, but it had everything she needed: observation equipment, medical supplies, and most importantly, patience. She spent the first week simply watching. The Vorath cubs, each roughly the size of a large earth dog, moved through their territory with predatory grace. Their parents hunted during the day, leaving the young in communal dens. The other scientists had been right about one thing: the cubs were aggressive, constantly sparring with each other, their movements a blur of claws and fangs. But Alara noticed something else. Between the fights there were moments of play, of curiosity, of something that looked remarkably like joy when they tumbled down hillsides or splashed in the volcanic springs. She began leaving offerings near the den. Not food, which might trigger hunting behavior, but objects: smooth stones, pieces of reflective metal, samples of off-world materials with interesting textures. She never approached, never watched directly, just left the gifts and retreated. On the 9th day, one gift disappeared. On the 11th, a small cub, distinctive for the silver streak along its spine, sat at the edge of the clearing watching her habitat. She watched back through the observation window, not moving, barely breathing. The cub tilted its head, enormous golden eyes unblinking. Alara slowly raised one hand, palm out, in what she hoped was a non-threatening gesture. The cub mimicked her, raising one of its 6 limbs. Her heart hammered with excitement, but she forced herself to remain still. Minutes passed, an hour. The cub eventually wandered away, but it glanced back twice. She named him Tarn, after an old Earth word meaning thunder, for the sound his paws made when he ran. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Alara had established a routine, sitting outside her habitat at the same time each day, working on her datapad, seemingly ignoring the cubs watching from the tree line. Tarn had become bolder, venturing closer each day. This time he approached to within 3 meters. Alara kept her eyes on her screen, though every survival instinct screamed at her to run. She could hear his breathing, a deep rumbling purr that vibrated through the ground. Then, with startling gentleness, something touched her shoulder. She froze. Tahern had climbed up behind her, his claws, capable of rending flesh, carefully sheathed. He draped himself across her shoulders like an earth cat might, his weight substantial but not crushing. His purring intensified, resonating through her bones. "Hello?" "Little thunder," she whispered. He chirped, a sound she'd never heard a Vorath make, and nuzzled against her neck. When she tried to stand hours later, intending to return to her habitat, Tarn refused to budge. He'd claimed his perch, and no amount of gentle coaxing would dislodge him. She eventually gave up and shuffled inside with him still draped across her shoulders, his tail wrapped loosely around her waist for balance. The Council's response to her report was predictable. "Impossible," the Xarathi ambassador declared. "Vorath cubs cannot bond. They are pre-sapient predators." "Then explain the footage," Ilara replied. turning her screen to show Tarn grooming her hair with surprising delicacy, his massive tongue careful not to scratch her scalp with its barbs. Commander Thelos leaned closer, scales flushing with confusion. "This is unprecedented." "No," Alara corrected gently. "It's unprecedented that anyone tried. You all assumed predators must be tamed, controlled, dominated. I just treated him with patience and kindness." Over the following months, Tarn became her constant companion. Where human researchers had failed with force and where galactic xenozoologists had failed with caution, Ilara succeeded through simple respect. She learned the subtle language of Vorath cubs, the ear flicks that meant curiosity, the tail positions that indicated mood, the different purrs for contentment versus anticipation. Other cubs began approaching. Within 6 months, Ilara's research station had become an unofficial nursery, with young Vorath coming and going freely. The adult Vorath, initially suspicious, seemed to approve. Perhaps they recognized that their young were safe, even thriving under human care. The Galactic Council eventually issued a formal apology and a commendation. More importantly, they requested Ilara's assistance in establishing first contact protocols with other untamable species. But Ilara rarely left Vorathis Prime these days. She had work to do, research to complete, and a certain mischievous predator cub, now nearly adult-sized, who still insisted on draping across her shoulders during her morning observations, purring contentedly as the crimson sun rose over the razor-grass forests. Tarn had declined to leave her side, and honestly, Ilara had declined to make him. Some bonds she'd learned transcended species. They only required patience, kindness, and the willingness to see a person, no matter how many limbs or teeth they possessed, rather than a monster. The galaxy was learning that lesson from humanity, one stubborn human and one affectionate predator at a time.